Pelota le cae a Declan Rice, pero no puede buscar el disparo. Prefiere volver a abrir. Hay alguien caído en el área. Viene Madueque queriendo desbordar. La cuelga Madueque. Remate. Ahí sí. Ahí sí. Zobe. ¡Gol! Del Arsenal, Zubimendi. Le aguantas uno. Le aguantas dos. Le aguantas tres. Pero al cuarto estás firmando tu sentencia de muerte. Otra vez a balón parado. Marca el Arsenal. Zubimendi. Zobe.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, a goodly morning to you.
Goodly morning, Andrew. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Listen, I just want to say first and foremost that I have reused the theme tune from last week. Zubimendi scored again, so I feel like it deserved another airing. And, you know, that Kaiser Chiefs Zubi thing, it might take off, Might take off. Maybe he needs to score a few more goals. What do you think?
Wow. Half a dozen already this season. Not doing too bad.
Not at all.
But I think it could take off and should take off. We should keep pushing it, really.
Yes. You start singing it next time you're there. And
okay,
that's
me on my own.
You on your own, whether you're in the press box.
Might look weird in the press box, but I'm prepared to do it.
Well, listen, that's how these things get started, It's just organic. One guy does it, then somebody else copies them, and then another guy copies them. And that's how these things take off. So
it's a beautiful thing.
It's a big responsibility on your shoulders. But you have such a beautiful singing voice. I think it'll work.
It'll work. It'll carry. So you're good, Andrew. I'm glad you're good. I mean, obviously, a bit of an interesting weekend.
Yes,
in the title race. Let's say, what with attaining that 9-point lead and then seeing it slashed to 6.
City, from the way people are talking, City are like 8 points clear of us now with that one win over Liverpool.
I think they did. I think that's how it works. They leapfrogged us. I think it was one of those, sometimes they talk about a 6-pointer. This was a 12-pointer.
Yeah. We really got turned over this weekend by, winning and actually increasing our goal difference.
Well, I know, right?
Yeah.
Hey, how funny would it be?
I know what you're going to say, right? You're going to talk about like one goal in the. I know where you're coming from, and it would be unbelievably funny. But I think I would just be sitting in a corner, rocking back and forward.
If
it came to that, I don't know.
I don't wish that on any of us. But the thought did cross my mind at some point during stoppage time yesterday.
Yeah.
I must say.
Common sense should apply. Forget the rules of the game. Forget the rules. Common sense should apply when, I don't know, it suits people for it to apply. In other cases, not so much, of course. But, yeah.
Yeah. What do you want to do? Do you want to talk about Arsenal, then about City and Liverpool? Or
yeah, I think we're here to talk about Arsenal first and foremost.
Sure.
So I think we owe it to the listeners to talk about our game, and obviously then the big game, or the other big game of the weekend, was what happened at Anfield, and I think we'll touch on that. Maybe we'll see if we can push it out to part 2, because I think I had a question on it, so that might kick off the discussion on that. But primarily, we're here to talk about Arsenal, and Arsenal winning a game and keeping a clean sheet, and like you say, extending the lead at the top of the table to 9 points, albeit temporarily, until the Mug Smashers did what the Mug Smashers do. But this was, I think, quite an interesting game. And maybe the thing we could start on, apart from team selection, there were some changes. Calafiori back in, Jesus up front, Havertz in midfield, Trossard back in. So there were some changes there from Mikel Arteta. But I think maybe the thing to talk about is Sunderland and their approach, and maybe how it was different than people were expecting, because I think there was a sense that, as they have done in some of the big games this season, they play with a back five. Inevitably, that would lead to this game being played primarily in the Sunderland half. Low block, Arsenal's kryptonite. Well, everybody's kryptonite, really. But I think it's worth maybe looking at the way that they played. They didn't come just to sit back and defend in a low block. And I think this was a game that we had to kind of come to terms with a little bit because of that.
Yeah, I think it does Sunderland a bit of a disservice, really, to just talk about them as a low block side. I think they always carry a degree of threat. A lot of that comes off set pieces, of course. You know, they've got that weapon of Mukiele and the long throw. And we saw a bit of that, I think, at the Stadium of Light in terms of crosses into the box, how we dealt with that. But yeah, I think, Brian Brobby up front for them is a real handful. Oof. I think, you won't see William Saliba and Gabriel physically tested like that by many other forwards in this league.
Yeah.
He is a handful and a half.
Yeah, he really is.
And yeah, I think that they certainly gave us some scares, particularly in that first half and maybe the period just after half time. So, to sort of bring it back to the overall headline here, to win this game 3-0 against a team who are having the season they're having and the degree of competence they've got, I think is a really, really, really fantastic result. Yeah,
I mean, listen, away from home, they're nowhere near as good as they are at the Stadium of Light. Their good season has been predicated primarily on their home form, but, they did go to Stamford Bridge and win earlier in the season as well. So, the away versus home thing can affect all kinds of teams in all kinds of ways, but you underestimate them at your peril, I think. I mean, there was a very good early chance for Kai Havertz. Good work from Leandro Trossard. He headed wide, but it wasn't sort of the precursor to Arsenal going on and absolutely dominating those opening stages. Sunderland did have possession. There was a moment, wasn't there, in our box when David Raya came and he was looking to be decisive. I think it was Ballard who went up for a header. Mikel Arteta said afterwards he thought it was maybe a foul on the goalkeeper. I'm not 100% sure it was. I think it's just a sort of coming together as Ballard is challenging for the ball and Brobby is there. I don't think it's going in, but it was still a moment of danger and Kai Havertz was there to sort of block it away. Yeah,
and uncharacteristic error, I think, from David Raya. I mean, Dan Ballard gave us loads of problems, didn't he, in the first game? Again, he's very powerful, very difficult to handle in the opposition penalty area. Raya is so good, so comfortable coming off his line a lot of the time, and even I think when we've seen Kepa in recent weeks, you've noticed a bit of a gap there in terms of what he can offer. But this was an uncharacteristic error. I think it was going wide, but a great chance for Sunderland, and obviously that would have changed the dynamic of the whole game. Yeah, for sure.
But look, it was one of those where I think it was a bit back and forth. They had possession, we had possession. There wasn't too much in the way of clear-cut chances. The one I can really remember probably coming closest to opening the scoring, apart from that Havertz header, was the Declan Rice shot from not far outside the box, where he curled it just wide, and I think the keeper was absolutely beaten there, all ends up.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting only because it's sort of a very similar move to the one Arsenal ultimately score from. To tip my hat to my athletic colleague Art de Roche on Friday afternoon, he asked Mikel Arteta about goals from outside the box, and they had a little conversation about sort of the necessity of taking on those moments when the opportunity presents itself. When you're facing a defence who are sitting quite deep, and Sunderland, as much as they had spells of possession when they were defending, they did collapse relatively deep.
Yeah, they got men behind the ball well, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Arsenal, we're evidently sort of looking to sort of create these little openings. I mean, I think it was Trossard who tucked it back for Rice, and it's a good effort, goes just past the post, but it's almost an identical position on the pitch that Zubimendi sends that zipped shot in off the near post.
So, I mean, listen, by the time the goal had come around, it was basically 50-50 in terms of possession in the game. We'd had more shots, 8 shots to their 2, but in terms of possession and where the game was being played, it wasn't not end to end, but it was quite even, and I thought it was very tough, and I thought Sunderland really did make it difficult for us physically to try and crack them open and to find those opportunities. I like whether it's a a new thing or whether it's something we'll see more of, the willingness to have a go from distance that we saw. I mean, Rice is so good on the ball, those set pieces. I mean, that if it had just curled inside the post would have been a spectacular kind of goal. But then towards the end of the half, things sort of opened up a little bit and the goal played a part in that. But before we get to that, there was an incident with Brobby and Martin Zubimendi where I think there's a genuine attempt on his part to go for the ball. He sort of catches Zubimendi on the shin with his studs. And it's one of those where if you look at a still, it looks quite damning. He got a yellow card. I saw a lot of people talking about this challenge. And I'm curious as to what you think about it. I don't know what the rationale is. Maybe the VAR guy, what's his name? He's not ESPN anymore, is he? He works for BBC now. Anyway, that guy.
He goes to BBC.
Yeah, he'll probably come out and say Dale
Johnson.
Yes, Dale Varman Johnson. I'm going to guess that what they will say as the rationale for that being a yellow card and nothing more is that it was a genuine attempt to go for the ball. He misses by a couple of seconds, or a split second rather, and it's sort of like a glancing blow. So I think Brobby is lucky in that it just sort of catches him on the shin, but sort of glances off the shin pad maybe, and the contact isn't really as significant as it might be. So it's lucky for Brobby, probably lucky for Martin Zubimendi as well, that the contact wasn't more sustained, if that's the right way of putting it. But I saw people talk about like, oh, look, it's like Christian Romero against Man United. I was like, not for me. It's nowhere near as forceful as that.
Yeah, I do wonder as well, is there a degree to which it's sort of cumulative thing where, you know, Dominic Calvert-Lewin had one similar, didn't he, like a week before, where
yes,
people felt, oh, has he got away with one there? So I suppose there's a bit of a sort of mounting case of, you know, what are people getting away with against Arsenal? I think in Brobby's case, his heel kind of plants on the ground and the contact that's made is sort of more with his toe end of his boot. And I think that's what, I don't think his weight is kind of where the contact is, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
But I think he is a bit lucky, as in, I think it very nearly could have been, you know, quite a bad outcome for Martin Zubimendi. And I, without wishing to sort of dodge the question, I feel like this sort of sits in that kind of orange category where I think probably whatever on-field decision was made would have been substantiated by the VAR.
I think, again, the way I would look at it was like if it's the other way around and an Arsenal player makes that foul, I'd be a little unhappy if they got sent off for that. You know, sure. I recognise that it could have been worse for Zubimendi, or could have been worse, you know, in terms of the contact. But I do think that when there is a genuine attempt to go for the ball and you're just a split second too late and the contact isn't as bad as it might have been, I think, you know, a yellow is probably the right decision there.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Calvert-Lewin and Brobby are both centre forwards.
Centre forwards tackle.
You know, well, there is that old cliche, right? But I think certainly in this instance, I think there would be a degree of truth in it.
So a minute later, maybe, we're ahead through Martin Zubimendi, who was obviously feeling no significant ill effects from that challenge. And listen, I thought Noni Madueke had a kind of poor game, didn't really impact the game in a significant way from an attacking perspective. But credit here, he does win the ball well out on the right-hand side. And from there, we recycle possession. We get it across to the left-hand side through Zubimendi. I think what Trossard does here is really, really clever. Really smart, because he draws the attention of two defenders. I mean, Trossard's experience, I think, is really important here. You know, he's patient. He can recognise the space that might be there for Zubimendi. He draws the second defender in and then plays a really good pass, which allows Zubimendi to sort of adjust his feet and hit it first time. It's a great finish, you know, at the outside of his foot, that it hits the bottom of the post. They always look great when they hit the post and go in the far side. But I think Trossard deserves credit for this. Zubimendi's strike is excellent, and obviously that's the most difficult part of this goal. But I think Trossard really plays a key part in making that opportunity to shoot.
No, definitely. I agree. I think he kind of baits the defender out to him, doesn't he? And then plays it off to Zubimendi. And I think he did this quite well all day, really, Trossard, against, a deep defence, sort of, figuring out where the space was going to be and finding those little pockets. And I do think there was something very deliberate about this move. If you watch the way Trossard kind of draws his man to him, then lays it off. If you watch the way that Zubimendi, he looks towards the penalty area, he clocks that Declan Rice has made a run forward, he kind of steps back, sits off, finds that little sort of, 10-yard pocket where he's just got time to get a shot off. And the execution is, I think, outstanding, really. I mean, cut across the ball like that to put the spin on it so that it goes in off that near post as well, rather than canning back out. It's just a beautiful, beautiful hit. And just another demonstration, I think, of what a terrific all-round player we have in him.
I think it's very interesting to consider the added goal threat that he's giving us in one season, in his first season, 6 months in, that we didn't really get from that position last year.
Great point.
There were, a couple of players who could occasionally score a goal, but with Zubimendi, what we're getting is consistent threat from a different position, from a position on the pitch we didn't really have it, last season. So I think that's just an interesting aspect of his arrival and what it's meant for the team, that it has sort of changed the dynamic of our midfield in a way. Like 6 in all competitions is no bad thing at all for a player, sitting here the 9th of February when everyone thought he was going to be the guy who would sit deep and keep things going and be a bit metronomic in his passing, which he is as well. But, this extra bonus goal threat he has been very, very useful.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken before about how Arsenal don't necessarily have a Haaland, a 30-goal player, a 40-goal player. But I think that means there's a responsibility on everyone else to contribute. If that's the case, I'm not sure you can afford to have, let's say, a Jorginho figure who's only ever a threat from the penalty spot, really.
Sure.
Everyone's got to step up and everyone's got to offer something. And he is adding this dimension to his game. And it's fascinating to watch, actually, because it's not a reputation he necessarily had in Spain as like a true box-to-box player or someone who made telling final third contributions, but he's adding that to his game, and I think he's emulating Declan Rice in that respect, of sort of growing as a player at Arsenal and under Mikel Arteta. So a great moment, and also a brilliant time to score, right? What was it, 5 minutes before the break, something like that? Just as the sort of tension is beginning to ratchet up, he finds a way to cut through it. Yeah, just before half-time as well. And it sort of seemed to open things up. By the way, I was just looking at his goal scoring in Spain, where he would score 2-3 goals a season. I think this must be his most prolific season in front of goal. It definitely is, actually. I'm just going back to 2021 here, 3. So I think the most he scored was 4 in a season before that. So, I mean, that's a really impressive step forward, particularly in a new league. There was the Gabriel Jesus incident, of course. I think this is one of those where, when you look at it, and I know I'm obviously looking at this from an Arsenal perspective, I know the rules are the rules, but I just want to see common sense applied.
I feel like if your feet are in your own half, you should be onside.
I've got tremendous sympathy with him because, I guess the rules are, I think I'm right in saying the wording is something like any part of your body that you can legally control the ball with or score. But actually the way in which he kind of arcs his body and his run to kind of keep his feet inside the half until the ball's released, when you first see it, you think, well, he should be onside there, But I think he's so close to getting it right. I've got great sympathy with him. He might even have been the man on that penalty. Who knows? Had it been awarded? So,
yeah, I mean that's a moment, isn't it? And listen, we're not going to campaign for an offside rule change, but I do think there's probably a way where you can say, if your feet are in your own half when the ball is played, regardless of whether you're leaning into the opposition half or leaning like half an inch beyond the defender, you really should be onside. You should be allowed to go through.
If your feet are in your own half, you're not offside.
Exactly.
Surely.
And if we get to a point where there's a 12-foot high footballer who's leaning forward all that way, we can cross that bridge when we come to it. But
Mikel Arteta's eyes light up.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine him on set pieces.
Yeah. But that was a moment, it was a moment where Sunderland, I think, would have been down to 10 men. I think it was a foul by Ballard on Jesus. It would have been a penalty. There was no attempt to play the ball, so he wouldn't have got away with just the yellow card. So that would have been them down to 10 men and Arsenal with a penalty. And then there was another moment just before half-time when David Raya bowled the ball out quickly, which he tried to do quite a few times in this half and was prevented. I think a Sunderland player got booked at one of those occasions where he blocked him off. But he bowled it out to Havertz in our half, and there was literally nobody anywhere near him. Took it on very well, and much like Declan Rice, the keeper was rooted to the spot, and he curled it just wide. His reaction told you, I think, just how close it was.
Yeah, would have been a really beautiful goal, wouldn't it? Yeah, great effort from Havertz. And on Havertz, by the way, I thought on that Jesus moment, that might have been a penalty, but wasn't. Interesting to see him doing a very number 10 sort of pass, like a real through ball. I think he plays that role, and in fact, I think the role is sort of shifting and evolving, but in a very different way to your classic Mesut Ozil or maybe even Martin Odegaard. But that was the kind of pass you want to see from Odegaard, right? A defence splitting pass through the middle to release Jesus.
And when you look at it, he sort of threads it between a couple of defenders. It's a really, really good pass.
It is perfectly weighted. So
morally onside Jesus. Unfortunately, not technically onside Jesus.
Absolutely, yeah. But there we go. I thought after the break, I thought Sunderland had another decent spell.
They had
David Raya had a little moment, didn't he, as well?
Yeah, there was a shot. There was the moment outside the box where the two Sunderland players appeared to be slightly shocked by the fact that David Raya had made a mistake, and were like, oh, fuck. And they didn't make the most of that. And there was a shot, wasn't there, that he saved, got down well to save, and you could see Gabriel sort of looking for the keeper to get up and claim the ball, and he didn't, and Gabriel sort of bashed it clear. So there was that sort of slight air of uncertainty which can happen when you're a goal up or only one goal up. And listen, again, fair play to Sunderland. They had a go. They were really determined to get something from this game, but by virtue of the way that they were going to play and approach it. We've seen teams in the last little while come to Arsenal and not show anywhere near as much ambition as Sunderland, even though they might have spent, 20 times the money.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder maybe their confidence was kind of buoyed by the reverse fixture, and they felt there are areas they could hurt us, because a lot of times it feels like teams, I don't want to say they're beaten before they turn up, but there is a lack of ambition in the way that they play. Whereas Sunderland, I think, felt like they had the weapons to give us issues, and they did. I mean, uncharacteristically shaky from David Raya in a couple of moments. I wonder if they sort of are connected. He comes for that early cross in the first half and doesn't quite get there. Is that just in his mind for some of these later incidents in a way that might impact your performance? I don't know. But fortunately, we managed to ride it out and get the second goal, which obviously put us in a much more comfortable position.
Well, the manager decided something had to change.
Yes.
So that was 2 subs on the hour mark, which I'm okay with. 4 subs on the hour mark. We're not quite as on board with that. But 2 subs on the hour mark, which I thought were good changes. Madueke, who hadn't been as impactful as he might like. Gabriel Jesus, similarly, apart from that moment where he ran through, didn't really have the kind of impact you would have liked from him. Maybe we thought it was going to be a different game against Sunderland. The idea that if they were sitting deep, we could get him on the ball in those tight areas, like the way he scored against Leeds. But I think what was interesting was the fact that we were pushing Kai Havertz up front quite a lot, and Jesus was rotating out a little bit, and Trossard sometimes would come into the central area, or Jesus would go out onto the left, or Jesus would drop back into a more central area. I don't know if that was to give us an outlet or not, but I don't know that that's necessarily where I want to see Gabriel Jesus. Like when he's playing centre forward, I guess it's part of their tactical plan, but I do feel like he is better when he's operating more as the central man rather than somebody who's being asked to link play in the way that others do better, I think. So Gyokeres on for Jesus and Martinelli for Madueke, not necessarily surprising substitutions.
No, and Mikel Arteta said after the game that when he named the starting 11, he told Gyokeres he'd have a big part to play in this game. Clearly, I think Mikel's putting a lot of emphasis on the finishers, as he calls them, and the important role that they play. And that was really evidence on this game. I mean, I suppose in Martinelli and Gyokeres, we're kind of bringing on runners as well, right? Guys who really want to exploit space in behind. And it worked a treat.
Trossard again involved in the second goal. I thought he basically tormented them down the left. By the way, his contribution in the opposition half was excellent. His diligence in our half defensively was outstanding, by the way. I thought it was really, really impressive. The way, you're talking about a 31-year-old player, senior pro. He's not shirking any of the work in our half, the chasing back, taking responsibility, getting on the ball, helping us keep possession, making a few passes. I really think he was as good as anybody on Saturday, and there were some very good performances and some very big contributions. But I really was impressed by Trossard. Look, he's not going to come out of this game with all the plaudits or the end product, albeit he does get an assist, obviously, for the opening goal from Zubimendi. But I just thought he was really, really influential and a sort of calming presence in a way because of the experience that he has.
Agreed. And I think in an 11 without Martin Odegaard, without Eberechi Eze, for example, he was kind of the principal tormentor, the chief instigator.
He's a fire starter.
He was almost the kind of, creative hub of the team out on that left-hand side. I think as well, he'll be really pleased to see Ricardo Calafiori back. It's easy to forget what an effective partnership those two had in the first few months of the season. They really did operate well in tandem on that left-hand side. And even in moments like the Zubimendi goal or the Rice effort, like there are runs from Calafiori into those kind of inside forward positions that take defenders away, that create those pockets of space on the edge of the box. And I don't think any of our left backs make those runs with the same, degree of intent and the same level of threat.
Sure.
So I think that helps Trossard too, to have someone going outside him or inside him, beyond him, basically, that defences really have to worry about.
I tell you what I really like about this goal as well is that the way he sort of, again, like he did with the Zubimendi goal, he sort of held on to the ball and tried to entice the defenders in and twisted and turned a little bit. And he played a pass, a risky pass, which he's one of those players who will always, not always, but he will try those risky passes. He'll bridge that risk-reward gap a little bit in the way that maybe some other players don't. It didn't come off, and Sunderland didn't necessarily clear their lines as well as they should have. I think it's Declan Rice who's putting a lot of pressure on the defender. He clears it. It comes straight to Trossard. He plays the exact same pass again. This time it finds Kai Havertz, who finds Gyokeres. Gyokeres takes a touch and he sort of stumbles a little bit, but I think credit where it's due here. Even despite that, he manages to get away as he's falling, a really, really powerful shot which goes in the back of the net for 2-0. It feels like maybe a couple of weeks ago, that's a moment where Gyokeres falls over and sort of doesn't make contact with the ball or something, that there is now perhaps a level of confidence. His record in the last few games has been improved, and that maybe we're seeing the benefits of that with that finish where it's not the cleanest, but he still finds a way to get the shot off and beat the keeper.
Definitely. And I think that's the sort of finish I think we thought we were getting, really, when we signed him from Sporting Lisbon. I think when you look back at the goals he scored in his career, that emphatic finishing, really putting his foot through the ball, is kind of a trademark of his. And actually, I don't know how much you watch the sort of training videos that Arsenal post, but you know, they're the finishes he's producing on the training pitch at London Colney, just absolutely thumping the ball beyond the goalkeeper. So I thought it was really heartening to see one of those from him here. Mm-hmm. I think his goal in Milan is probably his best yet for Arsenal, but there was something about this finish that I really liked, just how powerful it was, how certain it was, the conviction behind it. And it was an almost instant impact from him. So like a really positive moment for him to continue his recent momentum. Yeah,
6 minutes, I think, on the pitch or less, and he scores a goal. I'm sort of having this ongoing back and forth with Tayo Papula about how the goalkeeper keeps getting a touch on Gyokeres' goals. The one in Milan you mentioned, it's a great finish, but the goalkeeper gets a touch. Goalkeeper got a touch of that one. Goalkeeper got a touch of the one that he scored against Leeds last weekend, if you remember. So they sort of add to that sense that I don't know, not that they're clean finishes. I think they are. I think the power, that he showed, for example, at Leeds to hold off the defender to get the shot away, credit there. And this time he hit the ball so hard as he was slipping, despite the fact the goalkeeper got a touch, it didn't go in. So I'm hoping for, a nice clean one into the top corner against Brentford on Thursday. But look, a big goal for him and a big goal for us at that stage. It's an hour into the game and it was quite even in that second half. Who else came on? Eberechi Eze came on and I thought he was good. I enjoyed his cameo. There was a shot which was just wide with his left foot set up by Declan Rice.
He's another one of those players who isn't adverse to having a shot from a little bit further out, from the edge of the box. And I think that we saw that to great effect against Spurs. But yeah, I think as he had a livelier a cameo in this one. So I thought that was encouraging. Hincapié came on as well.
That's right.
Naturally sort of managing Ricardo Calafiori a little bit. And then obviously got the icing on the cake as well in stoppage time.
Injury time, third goal. I think it's Christian Norgard who's on for Trossard, who went off injured. Hopefully nothing serious there. He hooked it forward. Martinelli ran on and played it out to Gyokeres. He scored. I have to say, before we maybe talk about the goal itself, we talked about the Brobby challenge in the first half. I think the challenge on Gyokeres, as he's putting the ball in the back of the net, is really bad. Really bad. This is like the way Alexander Isak had his leg broken at Tottenham. Where there is no attempt to go for the ball. You can dress it up as an attempt to try and block the shot, but he's nowhere near. And he launches himself off the ground, knee height, into Gyokeres, who thankfully is made of fairly robust stuff. Like everyone's talking about that Brobby challenge. For me, this is a red card challenge. Like if that ball doesn't hit the back of the net, I think it's got to be a penalty and a red card. And
hang on, are you saying we should disallow the goal, go back for the red card?
No,
is that what we're saying?
I'm not saying. I think, regardless of the fact that this ball went to the back of the net, that should have been a red card for me.
Right.
When a player really is nowhere near the ball and they're off the ground and they're moving at that kind of speed, like it wouldn't take much for him to sort of land on top of Gyokeres. You get a tangle of legs and a knee ligament goes twang or whatever, something worse. I really think it was a dangerous challenge. Like the Brobby one, I can look at and say, he's going for the ball. Zubimendi's going for the ball. Zubimendi gets there just a fraction before he does, and it looks bad for Brobby in that instance, right? But I recognise that there was no real malicious intent, or he wasn't going out studs up on the knee to do a player. He was actually going for the ball, whereas in this instance, this guy knows. It's Reinildo, is it? He knows Like, he can't get anywhere near the ball. So he just launches himself at Gyokeres. I think it's really, really dangerous. Really dangerous.
I think he's a bit lucky there, Gyokeres, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, he gets up like it's nothing, you know. But then I guess when you've just scored a goal, that'll do wonders for you and for your adrenaline and your pain tolerance. By the way, Gabriel Martinelli on this goal, I mean, the way he breaks away from the Sunderland defence and just carries the ball half the length of the pitch. We've seen him do it so many times. I mean, obviously you think of Stamford Bridge as one example, but there are countless others. I do sometimes think that I think we sometimes underestimate quite how quick Gabriel Martinelli can be. It's always striking to me, you know, when they do those interviews with squad members and they say, you know, who's the best in training, who's the most skillful. Whenever they say who's the quickest, it's always a very immediate answer, and it's always Gabriel Martinelli. But for some reason, I don't think he's often talked about as like one of the most devastatingly fast players in this league. Possibly because we don't play, or our opponents don't let us play in a way that's conducive to exhibit that. But stoppage time of a game where the opponent has to chase and has to try and score is maybe the perfect moment.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, is there like the super quick player in the Premier League at the moment? Like your Theo Walcott, like nobody could catch Theo Walcott. You know, maybe there's a sort of a general equalization of top speed, or every team has a player who's like quite quick, but nobody's that super fast guy.
Maybe, and I think defences are quicker too, right? So it's like you say, I think it's sort of cancelling out. I mean, obviously Mo Salah was that player, but he's probably not that player anymore. It's just interesting, isn't it? I think speed at 10, 15 years ago was such a valuable asset, and so much of tactics seem to be based around that. I think in a low block league, it probably has less value. But yeah, I just think it's a really sort of interesting aspect of Martinelli's game that I think often gets overlooked. I think maybe because we spend a lot of time seeing him face quite deep defences, and people are maybe frustrated at other facets of his game that aren't quite as strong. But I think, you know, 10 years ago, I think he would have been absolutely devastating in this league. And I love, by the way, like the celebration after this goal. You know, Martinelli sort of goes and sort of echoes Gyokeres'
well, yeah, it's just a weird one because he does his own weird little version of it by putting his hands over his eyes. I think hands over his eyes,
which is what Gabriel did when he scored against Sporting. Which I thought was sort of at the time a diss effectively of Gyokeres saying, "I can't see you," or "Where are you?" You know?
Maybe.
But yeah, what I liked is just Gyokeres' manner. Like I think I spoke, was it after Leeds when I said, watch him after the goal, he just swears for about 60 seconds. And he was angry almost when he put it in the net. And I think this is maybe the...
Can you just say that again? Just go from, this is maybe the first time.
Okay, yeah. I think this is maybe the first time in a long time, maybe even since the Emirates Cup, where he's put the ball in the net and I think just seemed genuinely relaxed and content, and where the celebration has seemed fun rather than perfunctory. I do think that he looks a bit transformed emotionally, I think, by this recent run. I mean, 6 goals in 8 appearances now, and a couple of assists in that run as well. So yeah, I felt great about this, and I think I'm hopeful that he's turned a bit of a corner there, maybe.
There was maybe a chance for Gyokeres to have a hat-trick as well. There was a brilliant touch from Martinelli. There was a high ball. He took a touch and just sort of took it beyond the defender and had a shot, which keeper saved. I've got no real issue with Martinelli having a go there. Though Gyokeres was a little bit like he did the arms out thing, you know. Like, he could have squared that to me. I could have had a hat-trick. But I don't begrudge Martinelli the shot at goal from there, given he'd also laid one on for Gyokeres, as we just said. And his first touch, I think, would have made it a very spectacular goal.
Yeah, I think he's given him one, hasn't he? So I think that's fair enough. I mean, it would have been pretty cool for Gyokeres to come and score a hat-trick off the bench. But, yeah, big impact from him. And... A great win. Like I said at the top, I really do think 3-0 against the Sunderland side who posed us different problems in the course of the game. And I think in every instance we kind of adapted to those and overcame them. So I just thought it was a really, really positive day all round.
No, I agree. I think what we are seeing from this Arsenal team is an ability to recognise and deal with very differing game states. You know, the game against Chelsea was different. The game against Leeds was different. The game against Sunderland was maybe not what we expected, but was different. And we came to terms with that. And I think there is probably a sort of intelligence in the way that we play, which I think, maybe I'm going a little over the top here, but I think the Zubimendi-Rice partnership is absolutely key to that. Mm-hmm. The way Declan Rice reads the game is as good as any midfielder I've seen, I think, in an Arsenal shirt. And it's a part of his game that is getting better. There was a moment early in the first half when Sunderland had possession, and you could see the Sunderland player recognise that there's a guy in a position where he could play a dangerous ball through our midfield. Before he's even started to make that pass, Declan Rice has seen that this guy has seen that and moves over to intercept it and takes the ball down the left-hand side. And I don't know that anything really came of it, but it was such a demonstration of his footballing intelligence and the way that he recognises his role within this midfield. I think what's also interesting is that the longer games go on, the more he kind of comes out to the left-hand side. Maybe it's something to do with Calafiori going off, I'm not sure. But I really do think these two are absolutely fundamental to Arsenal when I don't want to say that was Arsenal at our best, but I thought it was a very, very good version of Arsenal dealing with a particular opposition and coming out on top. The opposition had really few chances. The XG didn't amount to much. And I think a large part of that is how we are able to adjust tactically and positionally in games. And I think Rice and Zubimendi give you the platform to do that.
Yeah, I think I don't think it'd be an exaggeration to say that if Arsenal go on to achieve what we hope they'll achieve this season, then I think they'll be talked about and held in similar regard to some of the very best midfield partnerships we've had at this club. I really do think they are in that bracket. They are in that calibre where if they continue like this, they'll be discussed alongside Vieira and Petit, Vieira and Gilberto and others going back. It's a great point about Declan Rice. I think because he's so powerful and because he's so physically dominant, I think sometimes people maybe make the mistake of assuming that's what enables him to mop the ball up and be in the right place at the right time, that he's just outrunning people. But I think you make a great point to say that a lot of it's in his head. The first few yards are in his anticipation, his reading of the game. I think you can see that he's a midfielder who has played or started his career as a centre-half because his nose for danger is so good. He's able to just snuff it out really quickly. It's a little, I mentioned Vieira and Gilberto there, and Gilberto was absolutely that guy who had that ability to read the game and anticipate where the problems were going to be. But what's interesting about Rice is that he has all these other flourishes to his game as well, that he's so good on the ball, that he's got the set-piece delivery, the technique, nearly scores a 30-yard screamer in this game. I mean, Gilberto was kind of the invisible wall, and Dec is sort of the unmissable wall. He's got every facet of his game, and his partnership with Zubimendi is blossoming right now, and I think it's still growing and evolving and adapting. I think Rice's role in midfield has shifted a bit since Kai Havertz stepped into the team. They are really and truly playing as a proper pair now. There's always an awareness of where the other is. One goes, one stays. I think it's hard to read. It's hard for defences to know quite what to do with it. and they just play minute after minute after minute. They're Arsenal's marathon men at this point in time, and I think we've got to hope it stays that way.
Absolutely. Maybe we didn't mention Zubimendi's little tribute to Mikel Merino doing the corner flag celebration, which was a nice moment as well. Merino, we believe, undergoing surgery today on his foot, which will probably keep him out for most of the rest of the season, but hopefully he can return quickly and play a part between now and the end of May, when hopefully things are still bubbling away for Arsenal. Beyond
Absolutely.
that, though,
he's got a World Cup as well to think about potentially, so no shortage of motivation there.
No, not at all.
And beyond that, I mean, I like I say, I Saturday night, 9 points clear. I think everyone was feeling very, very good about things.
Absolutely. Listen, I think it's one of those where you put it down to the professionalism of the team. It's a controlled performance, clean sheet. We've come through a period of indifferent form, and we look to be beyond the far side of that now, and hopefully we can continue on this vein because there's a big game obviously coming up on Thursday in a midweek run of games. But I do have questions about that stuff and more in part two. So unless there's anything else, we'll take a little break, will we?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. Well, we will come back with your questions and more in part two right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part two of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com, also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. And from there, we're going to have the first question. We touched on it, obviously, in the first half. The other big game of the weekend, James Reef on the Discord says, am I alone in being happy that City won? Because if we are to do this thing, I want us to truly win it as part of a proper title race rather than other teams lose it. Which I thought was an interesting angle on this, because I could not disagree more. But anyway.
He's not alone. Listen, I get that. I feel like it sort of annoys me, this narrative of Arsenal might win the league, but it's because nobody else turned up. You know what I mean?
Is that not true of every season when somebody wins the league? Somebody else didn't turn up.
Well, I guess so. But I think when one team is when it's more of a procession, I think that narrative does the rounds. I sort of feel like I have built up quite a significant enmity for Manchester City over the years. And look, I'd love it to be easy, but winning Premier League titles rarely is. And if there's going to be a race, let there be a race. I think I would take enormous satisfaction from beating them and inflicting that on them after all they've inflicted on us over the years.
But do you not want to crush them by 15 points?
Yes, but you don't crush a team who's given up by March. Do you know what I mean? For maximum emotional impact. It's like Leandro Trossard teasing that defender out towards him, before cutting him in half with that through ball. I kind of feel like narratively, let's put it like that. I mean, I suppose we have to consider in this, I am a professional football writer and someone who's obsessed with story generally. So the story of us finally overcoming Manchester City and it being a true sort of showdown does appeal to me, I must admit. But I don't expect the rest of the fan base to share that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, would it have been better for us if City had dropped points? Absolutely. Would I have preferred that? Absolutely. Am I happy that City won? Are you out of your fucking mind? Come on. I can't be happy that they won. See, where I would stand on this, and I see people talk about this all the time, is like, well, you know, if Arsenal win the Premier League, they'll be the worst team ever to win the Premier. Who gives a fuck what you think? Because I certainly don't. Like, if Arsenal bore their way to the Premier League, to the most boring... I could not give a single fuck, not a fish's tit about whatever anybody else thinks about this once we get it done, you know? So I get it, and the whole idea that it could go to the wire and Arsenal come out on top, but blah, blah, you know... I get it. It's great storytelling and it's great for the fucking highlight reels and the Premier League DVD of this season. But like, personally, you know, if that's the way it has to be and we get it done, okay. But I would sort of prefer it to be a bit more routine. But I also accept that no title race is routine, really, and nobody wins it that easily, or you certainly don't win it against a team with the record of Manchester City easily. But I will not be happy when they do what they did yesterday for the sake of the external perception of Arsenal's potential title win. That can, you know, get in the fucking bin as far as I'm concerned, you know? And I think we also have to contend with the way that yesterday is spun, right? Or the way it's like, now the title race is back on. But it was always on, you fucking dickheads. Like, even if we had a 8-point lead or a 9-point lead, there's still 13 games to go. That's a lot of fucking points. You know, it's not over. It was never over. But, you know, Arsenal win against Sunderland and everyone's like, well, it's all over now. Arsenal are going to be champions. And then Man City drag it out at the death because Alisson made a fucking huge mistake and gave them a penalty. And all of a sudden, it's back on now. Watch out, Arsenal. Like a hammer blow. It's a hammer blow to Arsenal because Man City lost yesterday.
Yeah, that's nonsense. I
mean that it is nonsense.
And I do think that... if you are feeling a bit despondent today, what I would say is they had to win a game eventually. Like, they've dropped so many points in recent weeks. Man City were going to win sooner or later, right? And yes, it feels big because it's Liverpool and because of the way it happened. But I honestly look at that game and think, well, they're moments, minutes from losing it. You know, and there were chances for Liverpool in the game. There was a potential red card, I think, for Liverpool. There's a wonder save from Donnarumma at 1-1 that keeps City in it. And then, as you say, a bit of recklessness from Alisson to grant them the penalty. It was sort of very, you know, it wasn't necessarily a win that convinces me that this City side are, you know, about to sort of metamorphosize into something else.
Like, it's a big win, an important win, but not necessarily a convincing win. I think if, you know, tables are turned, people would be maybe talking about, well, how Arsenal just about got it over the line. The thing about City is the sort of air of inevitability that they have based on what they've done previously, right? I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, you know, I don't rule out this Man City side going on a very good run because they've got a very expensively, highly talented assembled squad who are capable of producing that, even if they haven't done it consistently so far this season, you know?
I don't rule it out, but I don't, I mean, touch wood, but I don't necessarily see it as hugely likely at this particular moment in time. I have to be honest about that. And I think, I suppose, you know, we've spoken about narratives and storytelling, and one of the kind of core football narratives is the idea that one big result can have this kind of galvanizing effect where it transforms or solidifies a team in some way. And, you know, it's the start of something. And maybe that will be the case. But I think part of the reason that I'm sort of the mindset to say, bring it on, is because I still think we're the better team.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I think as well, when you talk about those moments and like it's a big game and then, you know, this is the shot in the arm that Man City need, and you feel like, you know, as a fan, you feel like, oh, this is it. This is a sign that we're going to go win the league. Maybe this is their Reece Nelson against Bournemouth moment.
Exactly.
Where we all felt, oh my God, like it could not be more scripted for us to go and win the league. Things like this don't happen, in a season where you're not going to win the league. And ultimately it turned out to be an amazing moment and a brilliant thing to experience. But in the end, it wasn't enough, or the overall season wasn't enough, despite that sense that we've done something here that's kind of remarkable, which makes people think this is your year. The fates are lined up for you to go and do it. So it could just as easily be that for Manchester City as anything more significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, time will tell, won't it? Time will tell. But it wouldn't surprise me if this was kind of a false dawn for City. As regards the title race, I know people are saying it's back on, and you're sort of saying it was never off. And I don't disagree with that. But I kind of feel like perhaps this is the starting pistol, to be honest. I kind of feel like it's not that it's all irrelevant. Every point matters, but it's March, April, May, really.
Yep.
That will tell us. And maybe, in the future, we'll look back at this moment and say, okay, well, that's where it really sort of became this kind of 2-horse race. Because obviously we haven't mentioned it, but Aston Villa dropped points this weekend.
Yeah.
I think that kind of maybe cements a lot of people's idea that they won't last the pace. But it is coming to an interesting head. I mean, there's the possibility, isn't there, that Arsenal could play Manchester City 5 times in the space of a month later this season.
5 or 4? Is it?
Well, they could draw them in the Carabao. In the FA Cup, rather.
Oh, fuck yeah.
There's the Champions League potential.
Depending on how that draw is
pans out.
Yeah.
There's obviously the Carabao Cup. There is the Premier League showdown at the Etihad, which I think looms ever larger. I had a question that I've been asked for the last few weeks, but feels like the right time to maybe ask it. Let me just find it now. Yes, Jack Rice said, James has liked this question a couple of times and not asked it. So this is your moment, Jack. With this potentially being Pep's last season, is it important for Arteta to get one over on his teacher before Pep leaves?
I don't think it's really about getting one over on Pep. I think it's
really,
about...
if you 1-to-1 with Mikel Arteta in his most private, candid moment, do you not think that's important to him?
Oh, I think it is important to him, because I think he uses Guardiola, rightly so probably, as a yardstick for his own
reference.
Managerial ability, right? Mm-hmm. That he's done it all, he's won it all, he's been the most successful and potentially the most innovative manager of this generation. They have their relationship. I think there is something there, clearly, for Mikel Arteta, but I don't think it's more important than for Mikel Arteta. Like if this was, let's say, Arsenal against Liverpool in a 2-horse race for the title, I don't think he would view it any differently. The challenge for him is to get this team over the line and to win the title after finishing 3rd 3 years in a row. It's much less about who you beat to the title than actually winning the title for me. And I think maybe that would add the icing on the cake or whatever it is. He must be aware that there is this narrative and there is that dynamic there between the two of them. They've worked together. Pep has done him out of a couple of titles, maybe at least one for sure, and maybe 2 that first season. But, there were other aspects at play. So I don't dispute the fact that it's important for Arteta, but I don't think it is the key driver for him. I think the drive or the motivation is just to finish top of this table, regardless of who he's competing against. I think that's a secondary thing.
I agree with that. His professional obligation is obviously just to win it for its own sake. But I do think maybe he's a better man than me. But I think on a personal level, it must hold some weight with him. Much like Andrew, if I ever went out and did my own Arsenal podcast, what it would mean to beat you at the FSAs. Do you know what I mean? The apprentice becomes the master.
Sure. Okay, I see where we're going with this. Just hang on, I'm making some notes here. Just write this down.
No, but I
the day it all changed.
I do think, knowing Mikel, I don't know Mikel, but given, knowing him in the same way any of us do, following his career, maybe it shouldn't matter, but I'd be staggered if it didn't matter.
No, I do think it matters. I just don't think it's the most important thing for him.
No, I think that's totally right. And and on the other side of the coin, I think, I suppose losing to Pep or coming second to Pep in his final season and missing that opportunity to ever have the kind of completion of that cycle, you know what I mean? And ever have that moment of kind of one-upmanship and I suppose arriving at kind of managerial maturity. I think he would consider that an opportunity lost. So surprise, surprise, I think Mikel Arteta will want to win the league this year.
Incredible analysis from both of us here, but I do understand where that question was coming from. But I just think it's really about what it means for Arsenal Football Club and what it means for him more than, any sort of personal rivalry or anything like that. What about this question, which I wanted to ask you, and I think it's quite an interesting one. Deckmurph AFC says, do we need to view Martinelli as a brilliant squad player who makes a big impact in big games at important moments rather than a forward who hasn't reached the levels we hoped? And I think this is a fascinating question in light of what we were talking about in the first half about Leandro Trossard, as well as the end product that Gabriel Martinelli has been producing this season. When you think back to maybe the summer and some of the conversations that were being had about both Martinelli and Trossard and Arsenal's need, in inverted commas, to move on from these guys.
Yeah, I think Martinelli is making a big contribution this year. It might not be in the way that he envisaged or hoped for, but you cannot doubt what he's offering across all competitions. I think it's 10 goals in all comps for Arsenal this season. 10
goals and 3 assists, so 13 goal contributions so far.
Yeah. I mean, granted, the vast majority of those have come in the Champions League, which, only 3 players have scored more goals than Gabriel Martinelli in the Champions League. They are Erling Haaland, Harry Kane, and Kylian Mbappe. So,
flat track bullies, basically, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. I think it's interesting. I think Leandro Trossard has kind of had his flowers a bit this year because he had that outstanding run, I think, in the first half of the season. And he's kind of become the starter in that left-hand role. But I hope Martinelli gets his at some point too. Because I think his attitude actually is second to none.
Yeah, 100%.
I think his mentality is superb. His commitment, his determination to be impactful in every opportunity that he's given, the way in which he prepares, approaches games. I mean, Arteta has spoken about this recently as well. It's exemplary. And for a player who sort of has been a starter, who's maybe lost that kind of automatic de facto position in the team, it would be very easy to let your head go down. And he hasn't done that. And he's pushing so hard across every competition to help Arsenal in any way he can. I really hope he gets some credit too, because I think he's a fantastic asset to the squad, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you could see why Mikel Arteta would just absolutely love having this player at his disposal because, like you say, the attitude, if he's not starting, he doesn't kick up, He works hard. He'll come on the left. He'll come on the right. He'll do a job for you. He does not shirk any of the work that he's asked to do on the pitch, whether it's in the attacking half or the defensive half. He's got 10 goals this season. He got 10 goals in the entirety of last season. So beyond some kind of horrible drought, which I hope doesn't happen to him, he's going to really improve. I think between now and the end of the season, he will get more goals. And I wonder, does it make Arsenal think about what happens with him? Because I think his contract runs until next summer, but there's an option for another year.
Correct.
But we're probably at a point where, from his perspective and from the club's perspective, they need to think, right, what do we do next? Is this a guy we want to keep around?
We have a question, Andrew.
Yeah.
From Lyra. Lyra? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. There's a lot of accents involved. And they say, goodly morning. If Trossard and Martinelli are good now, then who are we selling in the summer?
Like one of them? I mean, listen.
Or are we selling either of them?
I mean, that's the thing, are we? I mean, the one you look at, because he's older, is Trossard, right? He's 31, he'll be 32 next summer. That's where you're really starting to think about, okay, we've got a future-proof here. Martinelli's only 24. And I think maybe there are limitations to his game. But if you're going to keep one guy who's got the versatility that he has, who's also got the pace that we talked about as well, because it's not something we have a huge amount of in this team. We've got some quick players, but we don't have that lightning guy. Martinelli is the closest guy we've got to that, and that can be a very important weapon, as we saw on Saturday against Sunderland.
And he's starting to make significant contributions for the right-hand side as well, I think. Looking pretty dangerous there.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned his contract, 2027 expiry with an optional year for Arsenal on the end of that. There hasn't been any sort of talk until now of a potential extension. You know, the likes of Gabriel, Saliba, Saka.
Yeah.
They've all got done. Now, granted, Arsenal didn't have that comfort of an additional year potentially. But I do wonder how significant that may be, that there hasn't necessarily been great progress on a new deal for him. I think the reality is that it might be determined by the market. I mean, it's all very well Arsenal saying, we choose to sell Leandro Trossard. But there's got to be a buyer, and there's got to be a buyer at the right price. And if Martinelli's form this season generate a market, and it's a market which for a 24-year-old you would imagine would carry a bigger fee, then maybe Arsenal will kind of lean into that.
Yeah.
Equally, it may depend who else they can sell. I personally believe that Arsenal will have to make one or two significant sales this summer.
For what? Because the squad is too big, or because there is a financial imperative?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors, really. I think the squad is a little bit too big. But I think as well, just to sort of grant them flexibility around the financial regulations. You know, there's been big expenditure that hasn't been massively offset. I'm not saying Arsenal are broke or anything like it, or that, you know, they're hard up particularly, and the prize money they win this season could be
substantial,
pretty significant.
Yeah.
But I just think in terms of sort of balancing the squad cost, I think one or two will have to go. But let's say, you know, those sales come from other areas. You know, a defender goes, or someone comes in and takes over Gabriel Jesus' salary, then maybe Arsenal don't need to lose one of Martinelli or Trossard. It depends who they want to bring in as well.
Of course, who's available.
And think, you know, if there's not a left winger out there who's better than those two, then stick with it. But it's an interesting situation because, you know, in the summer last year, I don't think anyone was particularly excited about the prospect of watching a lot of Leandro Trossard or Gabriel Martinelli next season. And I think the way that they've improved since then. It's been quite dramatic, actually. So yeah, really, really happy for both of them, and particularly for Martinelli, who's such a good guy and has always been so emphatic and wholehearted in his love of Arsenal.
Yeah. I watched his post-game interview, and he was, just talking about how all he wants is to win titles with this football club. So
yeah.
We will see.
I think with some footballers, I think that's sort of a
bit of a platitude, yeah.
Yeah, something they trot out. And I really think in his case, he absolutely means it.
Okay, what about this? The duality of man, James.
Okay.
W Campo 33 on the Discord says, has Saliba looked a little shaky recently? I hate when he gets too tight, then gets turned and pulls back the attacker. Big Gabby, on the other hand, has mastered the art of containing his attacker. Maybe I'm being unfair by holding him to such a high standard, but I just feel a little less confident in him than I used to. While on Blue Sky, Scott Drayton says, bit of an observation, but I found myself marvelling at how unworried I was about Saliba, even though he got an early yellow card in that game. I feel like it's happened quite a few times, but I'm always impressed by how our defenders manage themselves on a yellow.
That is interesting. I mean, I think Saliba had a tough task against Brian Brobby, as we discussed.
Did you see his Instagram picture?
No, actually, no.
So it's a series of photos, maybe 4 photos, and there's like 3 of them are Saliba and Brobby pulling each other all over the pitch. Like Saliba's shirt is being pulled one way, Brobby's shirt is being pulled the other way. It was quite funny because it does look maybe like it's just the attacker doing it, but like that guy, he's like just all muscle, isn't he? And he's so strong and so mobile that it's a real challenge for any central defender. But, when it comes down to it, it wasn't a foul on Brobby, by the way, that he got the yellow card for. It was a foul on, I think, Diarra that he got the yellow for. But, Sunderland, Brobby didn't really have a great deal of penalty box chances or space or any kind of opportunity to score a goal. I think in large part that was because of how well Saliba and the rest, of course, defended. So I didn't get that sense that Saliba was shaky. Maybe he could have dealt with that yellow card incident a little better, but beyond that, I thought he was nigh on impeccable, really.
Yeah, and as the second question said, I think he managed it well once he went on to that yellow card. I'm definitely more in that camp where I'm kind of more impressed than worried about Saliba at this point in time. I think I just think he's a top quality defender, and what he has that really helps him is that when he is a fraction off, he does actually have speed and recovery pace to clear things up. I mean, there have been a couple of moments in recent games where he's made quite important sort of last-ditch tackles or interceptions, and they've kind of passed us by because, when the ball doesn't end up in the back of the net, sometimes the analysis isn't as acute. But yeah, I think he's made some pretty significant interventions in recent weeks that have helped keep us in winning positions. And I'm not too worried about him. Let's say that.
Me neither.
Okay. What about this? Yes, Bunge 1976 said, thoughts on Gyokeres' good form. Havertz has helped, but are we seeing more confidence, more adaptation to the league, or adaptation between player and team? Or is he simply now getting the rub of the green?
What a nice cocktail of all of the above, maybe. I think it could be all of those things. I'm very happy to see it. I know we've been critical of him this season, and I think there have been periods of this season where what you expect from a player in his position we haven't necessarily got. But, now we're getting it. Credit where it's due, and I hope he does feel confident. I think the one thing we always said was that strikers thrive off confidence. When they're not confident, you can see it in their game, I think there are probably connections that have developed a little bit as well. Maybe he's coming to terms with the league a little more. Maybe you just need 1 or 2 goals to go in to sort of light the fire under you as a forward. And I'm very pleased that he is scoring. I think it's 6 goals in his last 8, and maybe he's got a couple of assists in those 8 games as well. So 8 goal contributions in the last 8 games. It would be very churlish for anyone to complain about that, you know. If what you want from your centre forward is the ability to score goals, whether they're tap-ins or 30-yard hits, or, you know, the one he scored, the first one he scored against Sunderland at the weekend, where despite the fact maybe it didn't go in that moment exactly how he wanted it to go, he was still able to improvise a finish. That's great news for him. It's great news for us. So I'm really pleased to see him scoring, you know. I'm happy to eat fucking humble pie if there's a guy banging in the goals for Arsenal in a season where we hopefully go on and win the league. I'll eat it all up. No problem.
Absolutely. I think as well, I think he has benefited from featuring in the latter stages of games. There was a spell when he first came into the team in kind of August, September. Obviously, he was the only centre forward available. Havertz was out, Jesus was out, and he was playing 90 minutes after 90 minutes after 90 minutes. And I wonder as well, like, how wearing on him that must have been.
Particularly without a proper pre-season, or like a spell of pre-season where the training, despite whatever he did on his own, would not have been optimal.
No, and also I think adapting to a new league and almost certainly a new role in this Arsenal team than what he had at Sporting. Then obviously he had a little injury, but since he's come back into the team in November, he has been used a little more sparingly. But that meant that a lot of the time in games he was coming off around the hour mark. And I think it's interesting when you look at those 6 goals in the last 8 games, 4 of them have come in that last 30 minutes, basically. Some from the bench, or some where he started and then the game's opened up a bit and there's a little bit more space there. And I think Mikel Arteta was right to say to him before the game, you're going to have a big impact off the bench here, because he probably knew Sunderland, decent chance Sunderland would be in a position where they were chasing and there'd be space to exploit. And actually, I think it helps Gyokeres enormously to be on the pitch in those minutes. I mean, strikers are always gutted when they come off, but I think they're particularly gutted because they know games open up in the latter stages, and that's when a lot of them get their goals. So yeah, I'm not advocating to always start him on the bench. I think his form warrants starts in if the opponent suits, but I think clearly he's showing that he's someone who can be decisive and impactful when the play is a bit more broken and the game a bit more open. And I think it's really interesting for Mikel Arteta to think about how best to deploy that.
Sure. I mean, the other thing you could say as well is that he's benefiting not only because the burden isn't as great as it was earlier in the season, he's benefiting from the presence of Gabriel Jesus and to a lesser extent Kai Havertz.
Yeah,
you know, that the competition is there. You know, that's not something he had. And I'm not saying he wasn't trying his best or anything like that. But I think when you do know that there are other players who are ready to start in your position, it can be a little bit of extra motivation, or it can inspire you. Competition for places, as well as the fact, obviously, that, you know, he's not having to play every minute of every game. And Jesus can start here or there, or Jesus can come off the bench. And Havertz, who we've seen more often maybe in midfield than up front of late, which leads me to a question, by the way.
Oh, go on.
Simon King says, are we finding out this entire team was built around Kai Havertz? I don't think it's any coincidence how many players look better when he's involved in any capacity. And the other question which I saw, but I can't find an example of it, is like, well, Havertz is back now and Saka and Odegaard are gone and we're playing a lot better. You know, what does that mean for Saka and Odegaard? And I do think maybe there is a tendency sometimes to look at things in a way that's just a little too binary, you know, that X means Y or whatever it is. I think, you know, we went through a difficult spell of form and Saka and Odegaard were involved in that, but it's not as if we've never played well with those two in the team. So I don't think it's quite as simplistic as that. But what have you made of the return of Havertz and the way that it has slightly impacted the way that we play?
Yeah, Yeah, your point on sort of Odegaard and Saka is that thing of does the correlation necessarily equate the causation? I've been surprised in some ways how Havertz has been used. I expected him to come in as the centre forward. I think a lot of people did, to be honest. I thought that's where we'd see the majority of his minutes. And indeed, I think it's where some of his early appearances came. He played at Portsmouth. He came on in that position, didn't he? Although he did come on against Chelsea as a midfielder. When we talk about playing as a midfielder, I think it's important to make a distinction as well. This is not the midfield role he was put in when he first signed from Chelsea.
Sure.
That was very much the kind of Granit Xhaka left eight, maybe a little bit more advanced, but, you know, really a kind of box-to-box role arriving from deep. To me now, you could almost call him a kind of supporting striker, really, the way that he's playing. I mean, it's almost a free role in some ways, like a classic number 10 role where he's kind of dropping into, popping up in spaces wherever it hurts the opposition. I think it's working. I think it's certainly working for Viktor Gyokeres. I think it's helping him enormously. I think Havertz, his primary skill, and it's something Arteta has talked about, is that he makes those around him look better. And it's a hard thing to quantify or analyse, but it does appear to be true. Like, you know, his ability to combine, to find space, to link the play, raises the game of all those around him. And to be honest, I think will raise the game of Saka and Odegaard in time as well. You know, I do foresee a setup where we do have Odegaard back in that right eight. We do have Saka on the right wing, and Havertz is playing more as a kind of conventional 9, perhaps.
Sure.
Because that triangle has been pretty productive for us in the past. But right now, with Gyokeres up top and Havertz floating, I think it's working really, really well. And it's kind of pushed Zubimendi and Rice together into this more conventional pair. So I like it. Do I see us using it in the very biggest games? You know, like Champions League, away legs and the like? I'm not so sure. I wonder if Arteta might revert to sort of more of a conventional midfield profile in those games. But I think in games where we face deep blocks, the mass defences, having Havertz up there occupying central defenders, making runs, definitely makes us stronger.
I think what's really interesting about this is that, you know, he is clearly having an impact. He had an assist for the Gyokeres goal the other day, but he completed 7 of 14 passes in the 60-odd minutes that he was on the pitch, you know. 50% pass accuracy. I think it's the sort of statistical performance that if another player put in, you'd be looking at it going, well, what the, that's not good enough. We need more from that player in midfield. But as we said last week, I think there's something about his presence and his movement and where he is and how he drags defenders or midfielders out of position that is really, really interesting and impactful. Because on the ball, it's not like he's in there pulling the strings, but there's no question he's having an impact and has had a positive impact. But I think what's unfortunate a little bit, I think Bukayo Saka and Martin Odegaard are 2 players who can play better than we have seen of them in recent weeks, for sure. But I think this idea that Havertz coming in, we have to sort of clash one off the other. Havertz is really showing Saka and Odegaard how to do it. It's just not the right way of looking at it from my perspective. I think we can expect more from those players, but I think those players clearly still have a very, very big role to play in our season between now and the end of May. So,
yeah, and I keep thinking about the game at Ellen Road, actually, and how Arsenal started with Havertz playing off Gyokeres and a very kind of almost old-fashioned 4-4-2 in some ways, very physical, profile. And then in the second half, you saw the likes of Odegaard, Jesus coming on, and Eze coming on, and it almost looked like a different team and a different style of play. And I think the reality is we'll probably need both. You know, we'll need everybody in this run-in. But right now, I think as well, what you find in the second half of the season is sometimes you just stumble upon a formula that nobody quite expects, or sees coming. And I think when it happens, managers tend to lean into that. They tend to go with it and sort of ride the momentum. And I think that kind of Havertz, Gyokeres partnership, and then Rice and Zubimendi behind it, that feels like the most fruitful thing for Arsenal at this point.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Havertz's heat map, he's sort of floating around all over the pitch. You know, when you look at the heat maps, and there's like usually one bit where it's sort of yellow or red, which is where that player spends most of the time. Havertz is just these little pockets of blue all over, you know, across the front line, on the left wing, on the right wing, in like what you might consider the DM position, sort of an auxiliary right back in certain times. So he's obviously been given some kind of license to roam around the pitch and, you know, not act as a decoy or a distraction, but it must be disconcerting for defenders or the structure of the opposition team when they don't quite know where a guy is going to be and who's supposed to go with him or who's supposed to mark him or who's supposed to take care of him, you know?
Yeah. And just brilliant, by the way, that Havertz is managing to play consecutive games, you know, coming through them strong. You know, I think I think it's fair to say that there was some anxieties around his return and what the repercussions of that would be for his body, you know, the sort of pain management and how his knee would respond to the intensity of Premier League football. And again, touch wood, it seems to be going really well for him. And I'm delighted for him.
All right, let's do this one to finish us off. It comes from Beck John on the Discord. He says, I mentioned Saliba and Brian Brobby. He said, to me, it seems like defenders do a lot more grabbing and pulling than they used to a season or two ago. They often get away with it, but gave away several seemingly unnecessary free kicks on Saturday. Do you think this is the influence of Gabriel Heinze or a more general trend across the league?
I think it's a general trend, to be honest with you.
You don't think it's Heinze?
What, that he, you know, on a Wednesday he does shirt pulling? Yeah,
like isn't that his famous motto? If the attacker is fab, then you must grab.
I think they've actually got that painted on the walls in the dressing room now, in one of those beautiful Arsenal fonts.
Yeah,
I think it is just sort of endemic shirt grabbing at this point in time. It's almost unrefereeable, I think, because it's so commonplace. I had a really interesting conversation with a former referee last week about corners. And they were saying, not specifically about Arsenal or anyone else, they were kind of saying it is almost unrefereeable, essentially. You know, there's so much going on. The idea that a referee can have eyes on everything that's happening in a penalty area on a corner.
Crazy.
Especially when there's like, oftentimes an Arsenal corner, like 20 people in the box, is ridiculous. And yes, there's a certain amount of re-refereeing that go on with VAR, but they're sort of reluctant to do that. And he was like arguing that his solution was to sort of make corners a bit like hockey corners, where there are limitations on the amount of people you can have in the penalty area. So it's like, I can't remember exactly what his proposal was, but it was like 4 attackers, 4 defenders. And it's much more of a sort of set piece in that respect, with that actual space to operate. Look, it's never going to happen.
Does he think that's going to stop those 4 defenders and 4 attackers from pulling the shirts off each other?
I think the idea is that it's sort of more policeable, if you see what I mean, than just a melee, which is what it is now, with people around the keeper and people blocking and all those things. I do wonder. I mean, listen, Arsenal are the master exponents, and they have kind of exploited a grey area, I think, absolutely to the maximum. I do wonder what sort of repercussions that will have. You know, we know that people don't really like it. It's very clear that people don't really like it. I wonder if like set pieces, grabbing, you know how every season there's like kind of new edict from PGMOL. Like it wouldn't surprise me if we're sat here in August watching a string of disallowed goals at set pieces because the referees are desperately trying to
somebody tried to do something. I mean, again, this is another one of those things I like, because Arsenal are good at corners. The rules need to change because we can't have Arsenal being good at corners. Have Man United scored more goals from corners than us? Maybe they have. Nobody talks about Manchester United's prowess from corners. It's probably to do with the sort of the discipline and the organisation of ours. I mean, it is one of those where it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The Saliba Instagram post is a great example of that. Saliba is holding on to Brobby. Brobby's holding on to Saliba. Who grabbed who first? Which came first, chicken or the egg? You know?
Is it new?
I don't think it's that new, but what I think is
VAR puts a different focus on it, maybe?
Potentially, but maybe as well because of how physical and how physically powerful forwards and defenders are now, that there is just this ongoing scrap for the tiniest bit of daylight between you and the defender and the ball, or, you know, these guys are just big and strong and looking to get one over on each other. I mean, there was one, I think Sunderland got a corner in the second half where Brobby just sort of bashed Saliba. Like he bashed into the back of Saliba and the ball bounced off Saliba and went out for a corner to Sunderland. I think it's one of those where if Brobby bashes, let's say, Miles Lewis-Skelly, that probably gets given as a free kick. But because it's Saliba, that the referees are, okay, well, it's two big guys going at it and he was just a bit stronger than him in this instance. And actually Saliba's reaction is not to claim for anything. Not to say, that's a foul, he pushed me in the back or he bashed me in the back. It was like, okay, I'll get up and we've got a job to do here and defend this corner. I just think it's the physical element of the game, and shirt pulling has always been a feature. Maybe now because we see it because there's so many more cameras and photographers and we can see it much more easily than we used to. I don't know.
I do wonder if that's part of it.
Yeah.
I think as well, you make an interesting point. We spoke about the kind of equalisation of athleticism across the league, maybe, and when that is the case, where everyone's a brilliant athlete, they're going to look for those sort of marginal advantages in every possible way. It's everywhere, I think, and I think it predates.
Yeah,
even Gabriel ain't so.
Gabriel ain't so. When it gets down to real business, if the attacker is fab, then you must stab. But that might be something for the run-in. We'll wait and see what happens there, right?
Yeah.
I think we better get this podcast out to everybody because we have been a bit later on the recording than usual. So apologies for that, but it is out now, or it is out, obviously, because you're listening to it. We will be talking more about the Premier League action this weekend in an episode of The 30 over on Patreon later on. Myself and Phil Costa will review, obviously, Man City, Liverpool, and all the other games from the Premier League. Patreon.com/Arseblog if you fancy getting involved in all of that. For now, though, take it easy. Thanks as ever for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.